Keanu Reeves is a famous actor with lots of money, but he does not act like a big star. One day he went to a very fancy restaurant in Beverly Hills. This restaurant was super expensive, and only rich and famous people usually ate there. The inside was shiny and beautiful, with big chandeliers, fancy silverware, and gold decorations. People needed to book a table months in advance to eat there. If someone had to ask how much the food cost, they probably could not afford it. Keanu walked into the restaurant wearing simple clothes. Old jeans, a t-shirt, and boots that looked worn out. He did not look like a superstar who makes millions of dollars. He just wanted to have a quiet meal with his friend Sandra Bullock. A waitress named Vanessa saw him walk in. Vanessa had worked at the restaurant for 7 years and thought she was very important. She believed she could tell who was rich just by looking at their clothes and shoes. If she thought someone was important, she treated them very well. But if she thought they were not rich enough, she was rude to them. Many people had noticed this, but because she was good at impressing rich customers, she had never been fired. Vanessa looked at Keanu with disgust. She thought he did not belong in such a fancy place. She walked up to him and spoke in a mean voice, loud enough so that other people in the restaurant could hear her. "Sir, I think you may be in the wrong place. This restaurant has a dress code and a rule that customers must spend a lot of money on their meals. Maybe you would be more comfortable at the little diner down the street." The restaurant became very quiet. Other people looked up from their meals, watching what was happening. But Keanu did not get angry. He just smiled and said, "I understand, but I'd like to stay. I am waiting for someone." Vanessa rolled her eyes, making sure that other customers saw how annoyed she was. She dropped a menu on the table instead of handing it to him nicely. "Just so you know, our cheapest meal costs $95. I hope that's not too much for you," she said in a rude voice. Vanessa had no idea that Keanu was actually one of the restaurant's secret investors. He had helped fund the restaurant to create jobs for people in the community, not for fame or recognition. And at that moment, the person he was waiting for had just walked in and seen everything. Sandra Bullock, his longtime friend and fellow actor. Sandra stood at the entrance, watching Vanessa be rude to Keanu. Her expression changed from surprise to determination. She was not going to let this go. She was going to make sure Vanessa learned a lesson she would never forget. Keanu was not someone who showed off his money. Even though he was worth $380 million, he lived a simple life. He gave money to charities, rode the subway like normal people, and even helped homeless shelters. That morning, before coming to the restaurant, he had been volunteering at a shelter, giving food to people who had nothing. That's why his clothes looked old and worn. Vanessa did not know any of this. She continued treating him poorly, leading him to the worst table in the restaurant, right next to the kitchen doors, where it was noisy and uncomfortable. She did not offer him the wine list and spoke to him like he was a child. "Our special today is a fancy steak with gold flakes. It costs $375 before the wine pairing," she said, making sure to emphasize how expensive it was. Some people in the restaurant started to notice how unfairly Keanu was being treated. A retired couple sitting nearby exchanged concerned looks. The husband, a former film producer, squinted at Keanu, slowly realizing who he was. His wife placed a hand on his arm, telling him to stay quiet for now. A young tech entrepreneur at another table, who had recently become rich, shifted in his seat uncomfortably. He knew Vanessa was being rude but didn't have the courage to speak up. Despite Vanessa's bad attitude, Keanu stayed calm. He thanked her with his usual friendly smile. He looked at his watch. Sandra would be there soon. What he didn't know was that Sandra had arrived early and had been watching everything from the bar area. The more she saw, the angrier she became. She wasn't going to let Vanessa get away with treating Keanu like this. Sandra walked up to Keanu's table, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Vanessa's face changed when she saw her. She recognized Sandra immediately because she was a famous actress. Vanessa's attitude completely shifted. She put on a fake smile and spoke in a sweet voice. "Ms. Bullock, what a surprise. It's an honor to have you here. Let me get you a better table." Sandra didn't smile back. She looked at Vanessa straight in the eye and said, "This table is fine, but I need you to bring the restaurant owner here. Right now." Vanessa's fake smile faded. She didn't understand why Sandra would want to talk to the owner, but she nodded and rushed away to get him. The restaurant owner, a man named Mr. William, arrived a few moments later. He was confused at first but became serious when Sandra told him what had happened. "Mr. William, is this how your staff treats guests? Because I just watched your waitress insult Keanu Reeves, one of the kindest and most generous people I know," Sandra said firmly. Mr. Williams' face turned pale. He knew Keanu was an investor in the restaurant, and he was horrified that his staff had treated him this way. He turned to Vanessa and said, "Do you have any idea who this is?" Vanessa's confidence disappeared. I didn't know," she stammered. "That's the problem," Sandra said. "You judged him based on his clothes. You thought he wasn't important because he wasn't showing off his wealth. But real wealth doesn't need to show off." Mr. William was furious. He apologized to Keanu, who, as always, was kind and forgiving. He told Mr. William that he didn't want anyone to lose their job because of him, but he did want the restaurant to treat all guests with kindness, no matter how they looked. Vanessa was embarrassed. She had spent years thinking she could tell who was rich just by their clothes, but she had been completely wrong. Keanu Reeves, one of the richest and kindest people in the world, had dressed simply because he didn't care about showing off. The other customers in the restaurant, who had watched everything happen, clapped for Keanu. They admired his humility and kindness. And Vanessa? She learned a lesson she would never forget. Keanu and Sandra enjoyed their meal together, talking about their charity project to help homeless children. Even in a place filled with wealthy and famous people, Keanu proved that true greatness is not about how much money you have or how fancy your clothes are. It's about how you treat others, no matter who they are. Vanessa was not nice to Keanu. The longer he stayed in the restaurant, the worse she treated him. After giving him the menu, she acted like he wasn't there. She went to other tables, smiling and laughing too much at their jokes. She poured more water for people who didn't even need it. She described food in a fancy way, making sure Keanu saw how well she treated everyone else. When Keanu raised his hand a little to say he was ready to order, Vanessa ignored him on purpose. She acted busy fixing silverware and talking to another worker. She even looked right at Keanu and then turned away as if she hadn't seen him. At another table, an old man who used to work in movies made a loud noise with his throat to get Vanessa's attention. He wanted her to see that Keanu was waiting. But Vanessa ignored him too. Finally, after making Keanu wait a long time, Vanessa walked over. She tapped her pen on her notepad, looking annoyed. Then, in a loud voice, she asked, "Have you finally decided what you can afford?" People at other tables stopped talking and turned to look. It was clear she was making fun of Keanu, acting like he didn't have enough money to eat there. Keanu smiled kindly and said, "I'll have the wild mushroom risotto and a glass of water, please." Vanessa didn't bother to write it down, as if his choice wasn't important. She raised an eyebrow and said, "No appetizer? No wine?" "The risotto is very plain. Most of our guests like a full meal." The way she said guests made it clear she didn't think Keanu was one of them. Keanu simply nodded and said, "Just the risotto, thank you." He gave her the menu, but Vanessa took it with only the tips of her fingers as if it was dirty. "As you wish. Your water will be right out," she said and walked away. At the service station, she whispered to another worker and pointed at Keanu. The other worker looked at Keanu and smirked. Then another long wait began. 20 minutes passed before a different waiter, a younger one, brought Keanu his water. Unlike the other tables, his water had no lemon and not enough ice. "Vanessa is busy with VIP tables," the young waiter said softly, looking embarrassed. "Your risotto will come out, eventually." Another 30 minutes passed. Other people who came in after Keanu had already eaten most of their meals. Finally, Vanessa came back with his food. She put the plate down roughly. She didn't offer him fresh pepper or cheese like she did for other customers. "One mushroom risotto," she said flatly. Keanu noticed his portion was smaller than what others had. Vanessa crossed her arms and smirked. "Would you like dessert? Maybe just a simple vanilla ice cream? That might be more your style." She was clearly saying he could only afford the cheapest thing. Across the room, Sandra Bullock, a famous actress and Keanu's close friend, had been watching everything. Her hands gripped her purse tightly. She was getting angrier by the minute. The bartender next to her noticed and followed her gaze. He saw what was happening and frowned. Vanessa had no idea Sandra was there. She walked back to the service station, laughing as she imitated Keanu's polite voice. "Thank you, that will be all," she said, bowing like she was making fun of him. Another worker laughed with her. "He'll probably ask for a box to take leftovers home. You know the type," she added meanly. At another table, a woman in a fancy dress whispered to her husband, looking upset. He nodded in agreement. A few tables away, another rich woman who often ate at the restaurant caught the maitre d's eye. She made a small motion toward Keanu's table, looking concerned. By now, more and more people had noticed what was happening. The air in the restaurant felt tense. But Keanu kept eating his food calmly. Either he didn't care about Vanessa's rude behavior, or he just didn't want to let it bother him. The fact that he stayed so calm seemed to annoy Vanessa even more, like she wanted him to get upset. What Vanessa didn't know was that someone much more important was watching. Sandra Bullock had seen enough. As Keanu took his last bite, she made up her mind. She stood up, smoothing her expensive dress, and walked toward his table with confidence. Her high heels clicked against the floor. Everyone turned to watch her. Even the background music seemed to get quieter. The maitre d' saw Sandra and his eyes went wide. He quickly moved to stop her, but she waved him off without slowing down. Vanessa also noticed her and immediately changed. Her back straightened, her smile became bright and fake, and she rushed to greet Sandra. "Miss Bullock, what an honor. We didn't know you'd be dining with us tonight. Let me prepare our finest table for you," Vanessa said eagerly. Sandra stopped and gave Vanessa a cold stare. She spoke just loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Thank you, but my dinner companion is already seated." She gestured toward Keanu, who looked up and smiled warmly at her. Vanessa's face lost all color. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You're his." "I didn't realize," she stammered. "Clearly," Sandra said firmly, walking past her. Keanu stood up as Sandra arrived. They hugged like good friends. "Sorry I'm late," Sandra said loudly enough for Vanessa to hear. "Traffic was terrible." "Not at all," Keanu replied, pulling out a chair for her. "Just enjoying the unique service." Sandra sat down and looked straight at Vanessa. "We'll need another menu, please," she said. "And please tell us about all the specials. All of them. Not just the ones you think we can afford." The restaurant had gone completely silent. Every diner was watching. Vanessa walked back nervously, holding a menu like a shield. Her hands were shaking slightly as she placed it in front of Sandra. "And some water for my friend," Sandra added. Vanessa gulped and quickly walked away. The maitre d' hurried over and whispered to Sandra, "I deeply apologize for the behavior you've witnessed. Please allow me to personally serve you." Sandra gave him a polite but firm nod. "That would be best." Vanessa stood frozen at the service station, realizing she had made a terrible mistake. The other servers avoided looking at her. The diners whispered among themselves. The bartender shook his head, disappointed. At that moment, Keanu simply smiled at Sandra and said, "You always have perfect timing." She smiled back. Well, someone had to say something. As the maitre d' took over their service, Vanessa slowly walked away, her face red with embarrassment. The entire restaurant had seen what happened, and they would not forget. And just like that, Keanu and Sandra continued their dinner. The atmosphere in the restaurant completely changed. Sandra looks at Keanu's empty glass and nods toward it. "Looks like your drink disappeared," she says. Vanessa, the waitress, quickly runs to get more water. Her face turns red because she feels embarrassed. At another table, a woman whispers to her friend, "That's Sandra Bullock standing up for Keanu Reeves. This is better than any movie they've made together." The restaurant manager hears that two big movie stars are here. He rushes out of his office looking nervous. When he sees Vanessa looking upset, he walks over to the table and bows slightly. "Mr. Reeves, Ms. Bullock, what an honor. I hope everything is good?" he asks. Sandra looks at Keanu, knowing this is the moment to speak up. "Everything is perfect now," she says with a smile. "But I have a question. Why was my friend seated in this spot when the restaurant was half empty?" The manager's eyes flick to Vanessa, who stands frozen, looking pale. "I am very sorry for any misunderstanding. We treat all guests equally." Sandra tilts her head. "Do you?" she asks. Her voice is sweet, but there is something strong underneath it. Then she turns to Keanu. "Didn't you say you're meeting with the investment group about this place next week?" Keanu nods. "Yes, on Tuesday. We're reviewing the Lumiere Group's restaurants." The manager suddenly looks shocked as he realizes something important. "You're part of the investment team?" Sandra smiles. "Not just part of it. Keanu is the majority owner. He bought the biggest share 6 months ago." The whole restaurant gasps. Vanessa, still holding the water pitcher, drops it. Glass and water scatter across the floor. The sound is loud in the silent restaurant. The manager stammers, "Mr. Reeves, I had no idea. The corporate office never." Keanu raises a hand gently. "That was on purpose. I like to visit places like a normal guest, not as the owner." Sandra lifts an eyebrow. "And how was your experience today?" "Educational," Keanu replies simply. The manager turns to Vanessa, his face red. "Vanessa, come to my office right now." Sandra interrupts, "Actually, I have a better idea." She glances at Keanu and he nods. They understand each other without words. We could use Vanessa's help with our new project, Sandra continues. The restaurant guests lean in, curious. They want to hear what happens next. Feels like a movie scene. Sandra looks at Vanessa kindly. Do you know why Keanu is dressed like this today? Vanessa shakes her head, still unable to speak. He spent the morning at the Horizon Youth Center, Sandra explains. He was serving food and giving supplies to homeless teenagers. Keanu adds, I came straight here from there. That's why I didn't change. Those kids were more important than my clothes. The whole restaurant stays silent. Even the kitchen workers come out to watch. Sandra looks Vanessa in the eye. You judge someone just by their clothes. How would you feel if people only saw your uniform and not the person inside? Tears fill Vanessa's eyes. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. That's exactly the point, Sandra says. You never know someone's story. The dishwasher might be working 3 jobs to pay for medical school. The person in simple clothes might have given more money to charity than you'll earn in your whole life. The manager steps forward. Ms. Bullock, Mr. Reeves, I promise Vanessa will be fired immediately. No, Keanu says. Everyone is surprised. That doesn't help anything, Keanu continues. Sandra smiles, understanding. Firing her teaches nothing. But I have an idea. She looks at Vanessa. The Horizon Youth Center needs volunteers. We need people who care. 3 months, 2 shifts per week. Vanessa blinks. What? You'll work with the teens? Sandra explains. You'll teach them how to work in restaurants. Many of them need jobs but don't have training. And, Keanu adds, you'll learn to see people for who they really are. Vanessa wipes her tears. I'll do it. I want to do it. The manager, seeing how things are changing, quickly says, Lumiere will adjust her schedule so she can volunteer. And we'll start training all staff on treating guests with respect. A soft clap starts in the room. The elderly couple nearby claps first, then the whole restaurant joins in. Sandra turns to Keanu. Now, about that charity event next month. The Horizon Youth Center is full of energy. Vanessa stands in front of a small classroom, teaching teens how to set tables properly. Her hair is simple now and she wears light makeup. She looks different, more real. It's not about fancy tricks, she says, placing a fork carefully. It's about making people feel welcome. At the back of the room, Keanu and Sandra watch. Sandra whispers, I wasn't sure she'd actually do this. People can change if you give them a chance, Keanu replies. After the class, the teens thank Vanessa. She walks over to Keanu and Sandra, smiling. A real smile, not the fake one she used before. These kids are amazing, Vanessa says. Mia just got a job at Cafe Meridian, and Jordan has 2 interviews next week. Sandra nods. So the program is working. It's helping me too, Vanessa admits. I think I've learned more from them than they have from me. Keanu smiles. That's what happens when you teach. Vanessa looks at Keanu. Mr. Reeves. Just Keanu, he interrupts. And the best apology isn't words. It's becoming a better person. The center's director walks up. Good news. We've received more funding. We can help even more kids. Vanessa excuses herself to help a teen with an interview. Sandra watches her go. Quite the transformation, she says. The best kind of revenge is helping someone grow, Keanu says. Sandra laughs. Only you would call that revenge. Keanu smiles. That's why it works. The restaurant looks different. A new sign hangs at the entrance. All are welcome here. Inside, Vanessa is now the training manager. She teaches new staff. The person in jeans might be a billionaire, she says. The woman in gym clothes might be a judge. But even if they're neither, they still deserve great service. That evening, a special dinner was held in the restaurant's private room. Keanu and Sandra invite graduates from the youth center who finished their training. 5 teens now work at restaurants, including Lumiere. Mia, wearing her new uniform, stands up. Before this, I felt invisible. Vanessa taught us how to work, but Mr. Reeves and Ms. Bullock showed us that everyone deserves to be seen. Later, the restaurant manager comes over. We have exciting news. Applications to the program have tripled. 3 more restaurants are joining. Keanu, Sandra, and Vanessa smile as they watch the young workers confidently move around the restaurant. You know, Sandra says, when I saw how she treated you that day, I wanted revenge. And you got it, Keanu replies. Just not the kind most people expect. Vanessa smiles. The best revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's helping them become better. As they leave, a paparazzi snaps a picture of them walking together. The next morning, the headline reads, Hollywood's Kindness Revolution, How Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock changed restaurant culture. Sometimes the best way to make a statement isn't with anger, it's by showing people a better way to be. As Keanu always says, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. It might change someone's life, including your own. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting stories filled with adventure, mystery, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories coming and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.